The chamber of the Capitol in Washington, D.C., buzzed with the energy of an extraordinary congressional session. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the young New York congresswoman known for her sharp rhetoric and charisma, strode to the podium with determined steps. Her summer tan still glowed, and her navy blazer paired with a white blouse reflected her modern progressive image. The room, filled with lawmakers, aides, and journalists, seemed to hold its breath. The topic of the day was U.S. foreign policy in Africa, and AOC, as she was known, was preparing for a speech that promised to be explosive. Outside, the Capitol pulsed with mayhem, yellow taxis honking, and tourists snapping photos at the National Mall. But inside, the focus was global. Burkina Faso, a country rarely mentioned in the halls of power, was in the spotlight. Thousands of miles away in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, the scorching sun bathed the Place de la Nation, where street vendors offered fresh mangoes and colorful fabrics. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the interim president, was in his office at the Kosciuszko Palace reviewing national security reports. At 37, with his signature red beret and military uniform, he was a figure of both admiration and controversy. Inspired by Thomas Sankara Traoré, led a revolution to free his country from neocolonialism. His phone buzzed with a message from Amina, his press aide. "Have you seen what they're saying in the American Congress?" He frowned, unaware that his name was about to echo worldwide. Local radio played Victor Demay's songs, blending with the noise of motorbikes on the streets. Alexandria adjusted her papers at the podium and surveyed the crowd. Her team, led by Jamal, her chief of staff, sat in the front row scribbling notes. Jamal, a New Yorker of Jamaican descent, was the strategist behind many of AOC's viral speeches. He believed the Africa debate was a chance for Alexandria to position herself as a global voice. "Speak with passion, but with facts," he had whispered before the session. AOC nodded, aware that every word would be dissected on social media. She began, "Ladies and gentlemen, today we'll talk about leadership in Africa, and I cannot ignore what's happening in Burkina Faso." The silence in the room was palpable, and C-SPAN cameras captured every gesture. In Ouagadougou, Amina, a young journalist and Traoré's aide, watched the live broadcast of Alexandria's speech on her laptop, with her dreadlocks tied in a high bun and thick-framed glasses. She was a vibrant figure in the government, connecting Traoré's regime to younger generations. "Captain, you need to see this," she said, rushing into the office. Traoré, signing documents, looked up, intrigued. Amina connected the laptop to a projector, and Alexandria's image filled the walls. "Who is this woman speaking so boldly about my country?" he asked, his voice calm but with a spark of curiosity. Amina replied, "Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's a force in the U.S., but this is personal." Alexandria's speech gained momentum. "Ibrahim Traoré presents himself as a liberator, but his radical policies are isolating Burkina Faso and endangering the Sahel's stability. He expels allies, nationalizes mines, and ignores the international community. This isn't leadership. It's regression." Her words sliced through the air, and the chamber erupted in murmurs. Jamal in the audience exchanged glances with other aides, knowing the speech was going viral. On Twitter, hashtags like #AOCV's Traoré began trending, with Americans praising her courage and others questioning her authority to criticize an African leader. Alexandria, feeling the weight of the moment, pressed on, unaware of the storm her words would unleash. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, the air in Traoré's office grew heavy. He listened to every word, his eyes fixed on the screen. Amina, by his side, jotted down parts of the speech, anticipating the need for a response. "She doesn't understand our struggle," Traoré muttered, tapping his fingers on the desk. Outside the palace, The people of Ouagadougou went about their routines oblivious to the brewing confrontation. But on African social media, outrage was building. Young Burkinabe, who saw Traoré as an anti-colonial hero, shared clips of AOC's speech with angry emojis. The stage was set for a clash that would transcend borders. Alexandria's speech reverberated like thunder. In the U.S., the media hailed the Congresswoman's courage with headlines like AOC confronts African dictator, splashed across sites like the New York Times. In her Bronx office, Alexandria's team celebrated the impact. Jamal, sipping Starbucks coffee, monitored social media on his MacBook. "You see AOC 3 million views on the speech clip," he exclaimed, adjusting his glasses. But Alexandria, seated in her swivel chair, seemed uneasy. "Jamal, I wanted to spark a debate, but did I go too far?" Her voice carried a rare hint of doubt. Outside the window, the sound of the subway mingled with the city's hum. In Ouagadougou, the reaction was one of contained fury. At the Place de la Nation, a crowd gathered spontaneously, holding signs reading, "AOC respect Burkina Faso," and "Traoré is our Sankara." Amina, observing the protest, sent updates to the captain via WhatsApp. "The people are with you, but we need to respond," she wrote. Traoré, in his office, read reports about security threats in the north, where jihadists continued to menace villages. But Alexandria's criticism distracted him. "She talks of stability. But what have the U.S. done for us besides exploit our minds?" He said to Amina, his voice firm. The scent of sandalwood incense lingered as he planned his response. In the U.S., pressure on Alexandria mounted. During an MSNBC interview, she defended her speech. "I criticized Traoré because I believe Africa deserves leaders who promote peace, not isolation." But social media was divided. While American progressives cheered, voices from the African diaspora, especially in Harlem, accused her of arrogance. "Who is she to judge a leader fighting imperialism?" tweeted an activist. Jamal, sensing the risk, suggested, Maybe we should clarify the speech. Explain you support self-determination." Alexandria hesitated, feeling that backtracking might seem weak. In Burkina Faso, Traoré called an emergency meeting with his advisors. Amina, her notebook filled with scribbles, proposed, "Captain, a live speech broadcast on RTB and social media could silence the critics. The world needs to hear you." Traoré nodded, but his gaze was distant. He thought of Thomas Sankara, whose 1987 assassination remained a reminder of the cost of defying the West. "I won't just respond," he said, standing. "I'll show the world who truly hinders our freedom." Outside the palace, drums and chants of support echoed as the crowd grew. The conflict went global. At the UN, African diplomats expressed solidarity with Traoré, while the U.S. defended Alexandria's free speech. In Washington, Alexandria received emails from constituents, some praising her boldness, others calling her a disguised neocolonialist. She walked through the Capitol, the weight of criticism visible on her shoulders. "Jamal, I spoke for justice, but now it feels like I'm on trial," she confessed. Jamal, ever pragmatic, replied, "You opened Pandora's box, AOC. Now it's about how you respond." The gray DC sky mirrored the brewing tension. In Ouagadougou, Traoré prepared his speech. He chose to speak at the Place de la Nation, before the people, rather than a studio. Amina coordinated the broadcast, ensuring global viewership. "Captain, the world is watching. Speak from the heart," she said, adjusting the microphone. Traoré, in his red beret and resolute gaze, stepped onto the makeshift stage. The crowd roared, waving Burkina Faso flags and Sankara portraits. "Today I speak not just for myself, but for all who dream of a free Africa," he began. His words, charged with emotion, marked the start of a response that would shift the narrative. Traoré's speech at the Place de la Nation was a game-changer broadcast live on RTB and viral on YouTube. It began with a direct question. Who is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to say what Africa needs? The crowd erupted in applause, and Traoré continued highlighting U.S. interventions in Africa. The U.S. talks of democracy but funds coups and exploits our wealth. Meanwhile, we Burkinabe fight to protect our children from jihadists. His voice resonated, blending with mossy drums. Amina backstage monitored Twitter, where hashtags like Dirhabas, Traoré Speaks, and Africa Rising trended. Youth across the continent shared clips likening Traoré to Sankara. In Washington, Alexandria watched the speech in her office with Jamal by her side. The laptop screen showed Traoré in his red beret, gesturing with conviction. "He's good," Jamal muttered almost admiringly. Alexandria, however, felt frustration and curiosity. "He's twisting my words, Jamal. I never supported imperialism." She jotted down parts of the speech, determined to respond. For the first time, she wondered if she had underestimated Traoré. Outside, the capital was quiet, but Alexandria knew the American press would soon demand a rebuttal. The smell of stale coffee lingered as she reflected on her next move. In Ouagadougou, Traoré's popularity soared. Street vendors shouted headlines like, "Traoré silences the West." Amina, exhausted after managing the broadcast, sipped Bissap tea with colleagues at the palace. "He said what we all think," she said, her eyes shining. But she knew the clash with Alexandria could have diplomatic consequences. "What if the U.S. retaliates with sanctions?" a colleague asked. Amina shook her head. "The captain is betting on sovereignty. He believes the people will protect us." Outside, the setting sun painted the sky orange as motorbikes zipped through dusty streets. In the U.S., Alexandria faced a dilemma. During a team meeting, she voiced her hesitation. "If I respond forcefully, I seem defensive. If I stay silent, I seem weak." Jamal suggested a middle ground, an op-ed in the Washington Post clarifying her stance. "You can acknowledge Burkina Faso's struggle, but maintain your critique of Traoré's policies," he said. Alexandria agreed, but her heart was restless. She thought of her own story, a Puerto Rican daughter fighting the establishment. "Do Traoré and I have more in common than I think?" she murmured, glancing at her grandmother's photo on the desk. The sound of D.C. traffic filled the room, a reminder of constant pressure. In Burkina Faso, Traoré grappled with his own reflections. After the speech, he met with Amina and other aides. "AOC is young like me. She talks of justice, but she doesn't understand our reality," he said, eyeing a Sankara portrait on the wall. Amina, ever candid, replied, "Captain, she's influential. Maybe it's worth engaging, not just confronting." Traoré chuckled, a rare moment of levity. "Engage with Washington. They only listen when we shake them." But doubt took root. He thought of internal challenges, jihadists, a fragile economy, and wondered if clashing with Alexandria was worth the political cost. A muezzin's call echoed in the distance, summoning the faithful to prayer. The clash became a global symbol. On forums from Reddit to Pan-African WhatsApp groups, debates raged. AOC represented Western progressivism, while Traoré embodied African nationalism. In Washington, Alexandria finalized her op-ed titled "For a Free but Accountable Africa." She wrote carefully, balancing criticism and empathy. In Ouagadougou, Traoré planned his next move knowing the world was watching. The tension between them, even without a physical meeting, was palpable, setting the stage for the climax of their confrontation. Alexandria's Washington Post op-ed titled "For a Free but Accountable Africa" was published with fanfare. It acknowledged Burkina Faso's fight against neocolonialism, but reiterated that Traoré's policies like expelling French troops and nationalizing mines were risky. "I want a sovereign Africa, but sovereignty cannot mean chaos," she wrote. The piece won praise from U.S. moderates, but was met with scorn in Ouagadougou. On the streets, young Burkinabe burned copies of the paper shouting, "AOC go home." Amina, tracking reactions, messaged Traoré, "Captain, she's doubled down. We need something bigger." The May heat weighed heavy and the air smelled of dust and smoke. Traoré responded with a second speech, this time at a virtual Pan-African forum broadcast to millions. He took the stage at Joseph Kizerbo University in Ouagadougou, facing students and regional leaders. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez speaks of accountability. But who answers for centuries of plundering my people? He began, his voice steady. He cited facts: gold exploitation by Western firms, foreign-backed coups, the debt strangling Africa. "We don't want your pity. We want our freedom." The crowd roared and the speech topped global trends. Even Jamal in New York was impressed. He's a master storyteller. In Washington, Alexandria felt the blow. At a Bronx community event, a young activist challenged her, "Why attack Traoré, who fights for his people while ignoring what the U.S. does in Africa?" The question caught her off guard, and the crowd murmured. Alexandria took a deep breath and replied, "I criticized Traoré because I believe Africa can be more than a symbol of resistance, but maybe I need to listen more." It was a rare moment of vulnerability captured on phones and shared online. Jamal backstage whispered, "That was brave, AOC. It could turn the tide." The scent of Puerto Rican food wafted through the air, grounding her in her roots. In Ouagadougou, Traoré's speech unified the people further. At the Place de la Nation, a spontaneous celebration erupted with musicians playing balafon and Mossi dancers performing. Amina, exhausted, laughed as children mimicked Traoré's red beret. But privately, she warned the captain, "Your popularity is at its peak, but the economy is fragile. We need allies, not just enemies." Traoré, gazing at the city lights from his window, replied, "Amina, the people are my allies, but maybe I should consider what this American is really saying." For the first time, he acknowledged Alexandria might have something to offer. The confrontation peaked when African academics proposed a virtual debate between Alexandria and Traoré. The idea gained traction online, with the AOC vs Traoré debate trending. Alexandria, pressured by her base, accepted the invitation, albeit cautiously. "I'm not sure he'll want to engage," she told Jamal, walking along the National Mall. Traoré, meanwhile, hesitated. "A debate with her, it could be a trap," he told Amina. But public pressure was immense, and both knew the world expected a resolution. Ouagadougou's starry sky seemed to reflect the moment's magnitude. Amid the tension, a moment of humor lightened the mood. During a CNN interview, Alexandria laughed when asked if she'd wear a red beret like Traoré. "Maybe, but I prefer my red lipstick," she quipped, drawing chuckles. In Burkina Faso, the remark reached social media, and some Burkinabés shared memes of AOC in a photoshopped beret. Traoré, seeing one, gave a half-smile. "She's got guts, I'll give her that," he told Amina. The stage was set for the next act, where dialogue, not confrontation, could reshape the story. The virtual debate never materialized, but its proposal forced Alexandria and Traoré to reassess their approaches. In a congressional speech, Alexandria surprised many by apologizing for any misunderstanding in her criticism of Traoré. "I want to learn from leaders like him who face challenges I only know from books," she said. The statement, aired on CNN, was a humble gesture that eased tensions in the Bronx. Her constituents cheered, seeing her as someone capable of growth. Jamal, proud, tweeted, "This is leadership. Acknowledge and evolve." The scent of incense in Alexandria's office created a reflective atmosphere as she read supportive messages. In Ouagadougou, Traoré, watched Alexandria's speech with Amina. She backed down, Amina said, surprised. Traoré saw beyond. No, she's trying to engage. Maybe there's room for that. He responded with an open letter published in African newspapers and translated globally. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, your voice is heard, but our struggle is lived. Let's talk not as adversaries, but as people seeking justice. The letter was a hit with Burkinabe, celebrating their leader's maturity. At the Place de la Nation, Burkina Faso flags waved and kora music filled the air, symbolizing hope. In the U.S., the media began highlighting cooperation possibilities. New York Times articles suggested Alexandria could lead a new U.S. approach to Africa focused on partnerships, not criticism. She met with African diplomats at the UN pledging support for Sahel development initiatives. I criticized Traoré, but I learned change comes from dialogue, she said in an interview. Her voters, especially youth, saw this as authenticity. Outside her window, New York's skyline glowed a contrast to Ouagadougou's simplicity, yet united by a shared desire for justice. In Burkina Faso, Traoré seized the moment to bolster his domestic position. He announced investments in education and health, funded by a new gold refinery. We don't need Washington, but we can work with those who respect us, he said at a rally. Amina backstage coordinated partnerships with international NGOs, a sign of pragmatism. Ouagadougou's people inspired began calling the episode the AOC lesson, a fond term acknowledging its impact. The smell of rice with peanut sauce wafted through the streets as families celebrated their leader's resilience. The clash, once a symbol of division, became a bridge. Alexandria and Traoré never met, but they exchanged letters discussing sovereignty and global justice. These correspondences, kept private, testified to mutual respect. In the U.S., Alexandria gained admirers in the African diaspora who saw her as an evolving ally. In Burkina Faso, Traoré solidified his invincible image, yet open to dialogue. The world watched, captivated, as two young leaders redefined what it means to fight for freedom. The resolution brought relief and introspection. Alexandria, in her office, looked at a family photo and thought, sometimes the greatest victory is listening. Traoré and Kosiam, holding a Sankara book, murmured, true revolution begins with respect. Separated by continents, they found common ground, the belief that dialogue can transform conflict into opportunity. The sound of DC traffic and Ouagadougou's drums seemed for a moment to beat in sync. Months after the clash, the world still talked of Alexandria and Traoré. In New York, Alexandria led a committee to review U.S.-Africa policy, working with Pan-African activists. Her humility in the Traoré confrontation made her more respected globally. In the Bronx, she walked the streets greeting voters who now saw her as a bridge between worlds. You showed you can learn AOC, shouted a young woman of Ghanaian descent. Alexandria smiled, the May breeze tousling her hair. The aroma of empanadas from a nearby stall felt like home as she reflected on her words' impact. In Ouagadougou, Traoré pressed on with his revolution. The gold refinery began operating and new schools opened in villages. He kept the red beret, but his speeches now mentioned international partnerships. Freedom isn't isolation, he said at a rally. Amina, promoted to communications minister, smiled at the progress. On the streets, children played soccer shouting, Vive Traoré! The sunset painted the sky red, and djembe rhythms echoed, celebrating a people who refused to bow. The Alexandria-Traoré clash became a case study in universities from Harvard to Ouagadougou. Scholars analyzed how two different leaders found mutual respect. On social media, memes of AOC in a red beret still circulated, bringing laughs. But the lesson was clear: dialogue, even after conflict, can shift perspectives. In Washington, Jamal filed news clippings about the episode, proud of his boss. In Burkina Faso, Amina kept a copy of Traoré's letter, a reminder that the struggle continues. Their story showed that freedom isn't a singular concept. For Alexandria, it was social justice and equality. For Traoré, sovereignty and self-determination. Both in their way fought for the same ideal, a world where people shaped their future. The clash, though tense, revealed that empathy can emerge even in the fiercest confrontations. In D.C., the capital shone under the stars. In Ouagadougou, the Place de la Nation pulsed with life. Two worlds, two voices, one lesson. The lesson wasn't just theirs, but the world's. In global forums from Davos to the African Union, leaders debated how to avoid such clashes. Alexandria and Traoré, without ever shaking hands, inspired a generation to listen before judging. Their words echoing across continents proved that true revolution starts with understanding. Somewhere a young activist reading about the clash thought, if they did it, so can we. Bokor, who truly fights for the people's freedom. Perhaps the answer lies not in a name, but in the courage to engage and learn. As the world spins with its tensions and hopes, Alexandria and Traoré's story endures as a reminder. Freedom is built word by word, heart by heart.